Gifts by Nick Vrakar. The day was over, and into the west the light retreated from the setting sun. The children were tired and weary now. They had already had their fun. They played all the games that could be played, winners ruthless without compassion. Mother said, "It's time to go to sleep, my dears. To bed you all shall run." Father said, "It's high time the day was through for Jen, Lisa, and Theo, my only son." So Theo said, "Good night, Father. Good night, Mother. Good night, sisters, and everyone." The children were tucked into their beds. The light switched off until there were none. Theo waited beneath his covers patiently until he knew his parents were done, and then he quietly slipped out of his bed, for his work had merely just begun. He tiptoed his way out of his bed, moving quietly with ease. The rooms were lit by bright moonlight, the open windows let in a breeze. He searched about the house for gifts, for things that he felt would appease. He took one toy of his and one of his sisters', the soft, plush kind that one would squeeze. From the refrigerator he took a slice of bread, along with 2 slices of cheddar cheese. From a jar on the kitchen countertop, he took 3 chocolate chip cookies. Outside the wind was picking up, it was rustling through the trees. He was running out of time to disperse his gifts, he did not want to displease. The things that lurked inside the dark needed to be paid their fees. His first gift was to the spiders who were not spiders, that lived mostly in the shed. Their web was strung up throughout the rafters above, wrapping around in interwoven thread, matting down the handle of the lawnmower and the back of the old axe head. Their 8 legs extended, black and serrated, and their eyes were numerous and red. Their fangs were pointed and sharper than steel. A single bite could crunch through lead. And so Theo gifted to the spiders who were not. He gifted them a torn-up slice of bread. He hoped that the not spiders would enjoy his gift, and not eat him or his sisters instead. He presented his offering beneath their web outside. He looked into the darkness and said, "Please accept this gift from my family and I, and leave us in peace," he pled. His second gift was to the things that moved in shadow, that he glimpsed only from the corner of his eye. They wandered through the halls just out of sight, and through the shadows they would slip by. They were always waiting, they were always watching. From deep in the shadows they'd spy. But for what? Theo did not want to know. It was bad enough to even imply. Would they claim his mother and claim his father, and deep in the shadows they'd die? Would they burrow into his sisters' souls? They'd be no more and never know why. Consuming the most convenient of meals to eat all those that lived nearby. He left the cheese upon the living room table, looked around the room with a sigh. "Come, shadows, from your corners and accept your gift. This is yours, no need to be shy." The toys were meant for the faceless, pale ones that lived deep underground. They'd hide in the basement and then in the laundry, the vents when they didn't want to be found. They wandered between the floors and between the walls. Their features Theo could never expound. Their steps could be heard throughout the vents, the clanks of their footsteps their only sound. They never left the house, not even a minute, and in this house they were bound. They would search for the smallest person they could find, and throughout the house they would hound, only to be lost in the passages between walls, a maze of pipes that could only confound. Theo gifted the toys that he had collected to the pale ones to give them something to play around. He crept into the basement on its uneven cement and set them in the back upon the cracked mound. The glass of water was meant for the family. Within the mirror they lived inside. Behind the looking-glass they dwelled, and in plain sight they did hide. They looked exactly like his family, in fact, like the genuine article, bona fide. There was a father and mother and sisters too. and a Theo that he had spied. Theo can only see so far within their world, and many times he had tried. They didn't seem to have any water to drink, perhaps refreshments they had denied. And so Theo gifted his glass of water to them. Next to the living room mirror he left it beside. For a moment he sat and told stories to his secrets he did confide. Theo said, "May you enjoy this glass of water," and then he and his others smiled wide. And lastly, Theo collected the chocolate chip cookies, brought them to where his grandfather's spirit sat. It was in the reading room in the corner on the old chair, at the end of the ornate woolen mat. His grandfather would sit in the back and he'd read in the shade of his old tumbled hat. He'd finish a book and start up another. It was clearly what he excelled at. It was a year ago that his grandfather had passed. It was in the reading room that he'd fallen flat. His father had told him that his grandfather was gone. His mother had also said that. But it was here in this room that his grandfather stayed. This was his permanent habitat. The chair still smelled of him, and the shelves did too, and sometimes Theo would stop for a chat. He left the cookies on the table beside the chair and left, as quiet as a cat. The gifts had all been handed out. Theo had processed the last request. Did the creatures that lived in his house consider him a pest? Or did they appreciate the gifts he gave? Did they consider his tributes blessed? Their silence was his only answer. He took comfort in their lack of protest. And if they weren't going to say anything, he wasn't about to contest. He snuck back into his bedroom, feeling no longer stressed. He had done his duty for his home. He'd completed his daily quest. He climbed into his bed and under his covers and pulled his blanket across his chest. Theo closed his eyes. The night was done. It was time for him to rest. When he opened his eyes again, he saw the light of a brand new day. He tossed off his covers and leapt onto the floor, leaving his bed in disarray. He ran out the door and past every room, running swiftly through the hallway. He checked outside in the shed for the bread. Where it went, he could not say. He found the toys brought back to the children's room. They had already been put away. An empty glass was left out beside the mirror. He brought it back to the kitchen without delay. He checked on the cheese and the cookies as well. Nothing but crumbles gone astray. Satisfied with his work, he ate breakfast in peace, happily eating through what he may. And then he dressed and laced up his shoes and ran outside to play. For a while the sun seemed to be eternal, always shining so bright. Soon enough the day was done and darkness come, renewing Theo's plight. His parents would tuck him back into bed, pulling the covers across him so tight. And he'd be back to collecting gifts again. Across the house he would make flight. He had gifts to collect and gifts to give, to calm his home's hidden blight. When it came to all of the things in the walls, the things that lurked just out of sight, the things that hid deep in the shadows, far from any scant hint of light, Theo would be courteous and he would be kind, he would be caring and polite, and so he quietly gathered up the gifts to give to the creatures of the night. The end.